doors that God actually opens for you or closes for you. It's a 6-week study. I think it'd be very helpful for you to begin the year with this study. I look forward to being a part of it. Dr. Carl's going to facilitate it. So Wednesday night, 6 o'clock in Building B, that study will take place. Come have a cup of coffee with us as we do that study for an hour. Also, there was a new adult class starting in 2 weeks. Not this next week, but in 2 Sundays that I and John Parker are going to be partnering together with initially to start a new class. Same curriculum on Sunday mornings, but our classes are full. It's exciting. The 5 classes we have right now are pretty full, and so we're going to be trying to open up a new class and just let some other folks kind of go in there and start up a new cell, and we hope some of you will come and join us who have not been in small groups at all or small group studies at all. It's a great time to study the Word, fellowship on Sunday mornings at 9:15, and I hope you'll consider connecting with that class or one of our small group classes on Sunday morning. So some new things that are ahead of us, looking forward to that. Next Sunday also is an introductory meeting for those who are interested in serving in Vacation Bible School. You're like, Vacation Bible School is not till June. Well, I'm a person who ramps things up long in advance, and it just helps me. It helps us. So if you served last year or you didn't serve and you want to serve this year in ministering to kids pre-K through 2nd grade or older, then you come to the meeting next week or next week at 3 o'clock in Building B. We want to reach children. We want to reach kids. We want to reach families. We want to reach kids like Hannah, who I'm very happy is here today. All right? We want to reach children with the gospel and families and parents. Last year, God gave us 19 kids. We're asking him for 40 this year. Okay? 40. Imagine that. All right? Well, we're going to pray and we're going to do our part to see if we can get to 40 kids in ministering the gospel and all the fun and the games, the snacks and everything that happens. If you want to be a part of that, I want you to come out next Sunday at 3 o'clock. This year, we're going to be doing the miracles of Jesus all the way through the year. Okay, there's 38 of them, so we're going to walk through all 38 in chronological order. The miracles of Jesus. And the reason I felt led to this, I feel like we're in a good place. I feel like this is the year of faith. We've come through resurrection year. We've come through unity year. I feel like the Lord's building some things in us that actually prepare us to actually step out in faith and trust him in ways that we haven't trusted him together before. So this coming year is about faith, and it's about actually trusting God and seeing God and focusing on him and on his son Jesus to the extent that our eyesight is filled with him. So that when our eyesight is filled with him, the things that actually come up against us or the things that we actually face actually look quite small. When his greatness and his bigness is in our front windshield, then the things that we actually travel toward or against in some ways just get very much smaller. And we find that we're developing faith muscles, faith strength, and confidence to do some things that actually the Lord would have us to do by faith. So we're going to talk about miracles. So what's a miracle? Well, we would say there's miracle. The word miracle is used a lot of ways today. You'll see the miracle play. They'll show you the top 10 miracle plays in football. Does anybody think an actual God-designed miracle actually helped that guy catch it with one hand in the end zone? Are we prepared to build a church in the end zone on that miracle? No, it was a lot of skill. That's why we watch these guys, or I do. I know some of you don't, but we watch these guys because they can catch a football like nobody else can. That's why they get millions of dollars. If you could catch the football like they catch it, we would pay you $1 zillion. But you can't, I can't, they can. But that's not a miracle. We use the word miracle. That was a miracle play. Or the last throw into the end zone with no seconds on the clock. Or the last batter in the 9th inning, 2 outs. One guy on, need 3 runs, hits it over the fence. It's a miracle. That's not a miracle, okay? We'd say it's a miracle. I can't believe, we might say this to our spouses. I can't believe it. Here you are. It's a miracle. You're on time. Is that a miracle? Are we prepared? Are we prepared to give sainthood to our spouse if we say it's a miracle? You're on time. And she's like, well, does it come with, a credit card? All right, I'll take sainthood, or he's the late one, I would say, could be. All right, it's a miracle. You're here. or it's a miracle, whatever. We tend to look at a lot of different things and use the word miracle, miraculous, it's derived from, as anything sometimes that we just want to say, this is out of the ordinary, okay? But the word miracle, as it's used in the Scriptures, or actually describing in the Scriptures, are supernatural events that God did, either in the Old Testament or in the New Testament through Jesus, that could not have been done if God did not do it. Could not have been done if Jesus had not acted. In other words, the circumstances would not have changed unless God, through Jesus Christ specifically, acted. The circumstances would have remained exactly the same or gotten worse. And Jesus stepped into that setting and brought about a change. That change, as we look at, is a change of substance, whether it's substance like today, we're going to talk about wine and water, or whether it's a change of someone who is demon-possessed, who is no longer demon-possessed, or somebody who actually needed food, and Jesus found a way to multiply food, or whether it's somebody whose bones were broken, whose eyes were shut, who could not speak. Jesus walks into those settings in which humans have done all they could possibly do, and Jesus remedies that setting. We say that's a miracle, okay? That's a miracle. That's a supernatural. That's not something the individual did or the circumstance produced. It's something only God could do. Miracles are things that only God can do, and He does them. He chooses to actually display these acts of power, to actually display Himself. They aren't magic tricks. They aren't zingers. They aren't like, okay, it's a show. Let's get on the road and do more of this. Let's if you just do more miracles, God, and more people will believe in you. That's not the way miracles work. Miracles happen sometimes for a very few small group of people. Sometimes they happen in the front of a large group of people. But it's an opportunity for those who can see and those who will recognize God is in your midst. He is acting. He is working. Do you know what this miracle means? Yeah, I know what it means. I was hungry. I didn't have food, and now I got some. That's all you got from the miracle? That's all you got from the miracle is you didn't have food, and now you got food? You didn't get the miracle. Okay, we're going to talk about what that is. What was the miracle meant to produce? What did the miracle mean? So miracles on the surface seem very simple to speak of. Today, Jesus made water into wine. Cool. That's pretty interesting. No, but what's the context? What was the miracle for? That's what we're going to dig in. Because I think we have to understand how miracles work. We say we want miracles, we desire miracles, we believe God is a God of miracles. But understand, when He does miracles, when He does works or signs of power, He isn't just doing them to remedy the circumstance. He's doing them to teach you about Himself. There's things you have to know, you have to recognize, otherwise you will, and I can, mishandle the miracle. We can look at the miracle itself and say, that was pretty good, God. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? We are people who are struck very profoundly and deeply with the show. We want to know what's next. We want to know, what can you do, God? You did this for them, you did this for him. What are you going to do next? God just doesn't send miracles around like toys. They have a reason, they have a meaning. So go to chapter 2. The words will be on screen, I believe, and I want you to read along with me as I read out loud chapter 2. It says, on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding as well. Customary thing, going to be a wedding, invite people. Jesus' mother is there, and Jesus and his disciples, there's 4 of them so far that have basically followed him. They're joining. So verse 3, when the wine ran out, Jesus' mother told him they don't have any more wine. Now look at what Jesus says in verse 4. What has this concern of yours to do with me, woman? Ouch. Jesus asked, my hour has not yet come. Do whatever he tells you, his mother told the servants. Now 6 stone water jars had been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 or 30 gallons. Fill the jars with water, Jesus told them, so they filled them to the brim. He said to them, now draw some out and take it to the chief servant, and they did. When the chief servant tasted the water after it had become wine, He did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called the groom and told him, "Everyone sets out the fine wine first. Then after people have drunk freely, the inferior. But you have kept the fine wine until now." Jesus performed this first sign in Cana of Galilee. He displayed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. You see that, verse 11? He performed this first sign in Cana of Galilee. He displayed his glory. There's more going on here than just simply the act of power. Jesus is revealing things about God, revealing things about himself in this context. And it happens to come in the context of a celebrative moment of the wedding. Now, there are so many different illustrations and symbols here that have to do with a variety of meanings. I'm not going to be able to refer to all of them. But there are three things particularly I want you to notice about the particular miracle and the circumstance that Jesus acts in. The first one is in this wedding. A wedding was a big deal. A wedding was a huge deal. It always should be a big deal. But here, in this context and culture, it was a much bigger deal. It was parents getting together, signing a contract, an engagement contract. And that engagement contract included a wedding. It included not just a wedding, but a celebration that would actually honor the bride. It would be a celebration of the wedding. And the wedding itself and the marriage that was actually being joined together in marriage, the celebration, which might go on for a week or 2 weeks, was meant to ultimately be a display of how much fruitfulness, how much good, and ultimately how much bounty this marriage was going to experience. How this marriage was a joining together of these two families, and there was a great celebration, and these two families were honored by individuals who just came to celebrate the wedding. One big part of that wedding was the wine. Now, rabbis tell us in other writings later that the wine would have been 1 part wine, 3 parts water. Whatever the case. There's different kinds of wine, I'm told. I'm not a wine drinker, but there is cheap wine and there is better wine, just like there is cheap coffee and better coffee. I know the difference between very cheap coffee and better coffee, so I'm sure there is a marked difference in wines. In any case, wine was a part of the celebration. Why? Because it would lighten people's hearts. It would be part of the joy of being in that setting. One of the worst things that could happen in that setting is you run out of wine, because when the wine stops, the party stops, right? That's part of it. But even more than that, that's what the meaning of the marriage, that's what the meaning of the celebration was about. It was basically, it's bountiful, it's rich, it's abundant, and it's open to any and all to come and celebrate. They now have no wine. In the contract, he could actually be put in some sort of a hold, like not prison, but almost like a jail until this particular gap was made up of however short they were on wine. He would have to actually pay the other family this vacancy. He could draw upon half of the presents. Everybody brings presents to a wedding to give to the bride or the groom. The family could actually go and pick half of the presents for themselves. This is a very, very sad moment. It's a very sad moment. It's a very hard moment. It's a very shameful moment. It's a disgraceful moment, and it's hopeless. They have no wine. The party is going. The people are here. They have no wine. Jesus' mother somehow is privy to this. We don't know whether she's part of the group that actually put it on or otherwise, but she finds out that they have no wine. She turns to Jesus. Jesus says, "Jesus, they have no wine." Mary knew who her son was. She watched him grow from a baby. She heard all the angels, and she heard all the messengers of the prophecies. She heard the shepherds. She had watched this baby who had essentially come from her very womb, having not ever had relations with a man. She knew Jesus was different. He was unique. She knew the messianic prophecies about him. So at age 30, they've lived together. She kind of knows who he is. And like a mother, she just simply turns to her oldest son, who happens to basically have supernaturally conceived and must perhaps have supernatural identity and powers. She turns to him and says, "Son, they have no wine." Jesus turns to her and says, "What has this concern of yours to do with me, woman?" Now, in my house, if I had said something like that, I would have woken up about 8 hours later, okay? And my side of my face would have been sore and red, okay? In this culture, it was not that way. It's, some would say, better translated, ma'am. We get this in the South. It's essentially saying, I know I'm respecting you, but I'm not using your name or title of mother. I'm saying ma'am. But in any case, he's saying ultimately this, what does this concern of yours have to do with me? 5 times this particular word order is used. You know, when it's used, the demon said it to Jesus, what have you to do with me? They were basically saying, Jesus, stay off our territory. Jesus is basically saying to his mom, you're crossing a line here. I don't do miracles because you asked me to do them. I don't do miracles because you direct me to do them. Though you are my mother, I do miracles because God the Father tells me to do miracles. Now, this is very significant because in the world of miracles, the people that actually experience them sometimes can take on an authority that they have, in some ways feel like they are in fact closer and more essentially, how would I say, they're more entitled to miracles because they've been around miracles, like they've got this in with God on how miracles happen or don't happen. Jesus is just setting us all straight here that miracles happen because the Father chooses or directs them to happen. And Jesus is saying, ultimately, even though you're my mother, the one who is calling the shots for my life is the Father. Now, this is good news for us, for everybody. There's nobody who has this in with God, whether you're a family member of Jesus, like his mother, or whether you're around even religious things, whatever. We all tend to think somebody's got this in with God with respect to miracles. God would never do something in my life because I've never been to seminary, or I've never pastored a church or been a missionary, or I've never been on this certain level with God or experience. God does his miracles with people who he chooses to do them with. And everyone is qualified to receive a miracle. Meaning, just because of you're white, or you're black, or you're poor, or you're rich, or you're educated or not. This is just simply Jesus' way of saying, when I do a miracle, I do a miracle because the Father directs me to do that miracle for his glory. So let's be clear, when miracles take place, they are always for God's glory, not for the one who's getting the miracle done, not for the one who's even asking. Here's just simply a miracle that has to do with wine. You're like, maybe I get a broken leg and a blind person, or somebody's got leprosy. I kind of get that. Here, they just ran out of wine. Big deal. Why do you need a miracle for running out of wine? And Jesus takes this moment. He says, my hour has not yet come. Mary knew there was a future for Jesus. She probably had the idea that it wasn't going to go ultimately so well. But in this particular circumstance, it was just normal and natural. And they're here in a wedding. They're in a lot of trouble financially. They're in a lot of trouble legally. This particular wedding of individuals perhaps that we know, which is why we've been invited, they need a miracle. And Jesus said, it's not for you to tell me what to do. The Father tells me what to do. She turns in verse 5. So I say, Father comes first is what I want you to see. The first thing, Father's will comes first. When we're talking about miracles or needing a miracle, it's always, Father, what is your will? What is your desire? What is your plan? What is your purpose? What do you want to do here? She turns to the disciple, to the servants, it says, and do whatever he tells you. So it's like Mary said, Jesus, they have no wine. Jesus said, no, you're coming on my territory. You don't direct me to do miracles. So she says, well, I'll tell somebody else what to do. Servants, do what he says. Mary's going to tell somebody to do something, okay? Somebody's going to listen. Do what the servants, do what Jesus tells you. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. Verse 6. There were 6 stone water jars that had been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 or 30 gallons each. These stone water jars that held 20 or 30 gallons, they're good-sized jars. They are jars that are made out of stone. They are not created by wood or any type of substance. They are made only of stone, and they're purification jars because ultimately they don't need to be cleaned. It's a service. These had to be carved out of stone, carved out of rock for purification purposes. Washing the hands. Individuals would come into the home, whatever, and they would dip a ladle perhaps into the jar there and pour water. You would put your hands out, and the water would drop over your hands, and it would make you essentially as a purification process. The Jews had instituted a purification process that went beyond what the priests went through. They said if it was good enough for the priests to have to wash their clothes and themselves and their feet and their hands, then we'll just continue to extend that purification process even further into culture. And so they required this purification process of washing of hands. So you have here an extension of the law that really the law did not require, and yet here in this home is a purification process that simply is there for water and for purifying yourself in your interactions with this home. Jesus turns to those jars and he says, fill the jars with water. Fill the jars with water. 20 to 30 gallons worth apiece. Fill the jars with water, Jesus told them, so they filled them to the brim. Now, this is interesting because Jesus knows what's going to happen. He's going to change the water to wine. Why didn't he just simply say, let's find wine. Let's go out and get some wine. Let's go find wine where we could actually fill up the jars themselves. Well, he has them fill up the purification jars with water. Everybody knows it. Everybody watches the filling of 20 and 30 gallons, whatever it took to go to the well and back again to get 20 and 30 gallons worth of water. They fill up these waters to the brim. Now, water isn't wine. It's part wine, it's part water. Wine is part water, but it's not. Water is not wine. I think the first thing I want you to see is the Father comes first with respect to miracles. I also want you to see that water is not wine. Jesus putting water and having water filled up in these purification vats didn't improve at all the condition of this wedding. Okay? Didn't improve. He wasn't like, we're going to fill these up with water and we're going to start serving the guests water. Are the guests going to be okay with that? We just pulled it up from the well. It's nice and cold. No, the party is still going downhill. And the reason I say this, I say water is not wine, because that could have been an answer to this problem. At least people would have had something to drink. They would at least had something to drink. At least we would have said, you can't have wine, but we're going to give you water. At least you won't, dry up or get dehydrated in any way. When I was reading this, there's a lot of people who think a lot of different things here that have to do with the Jewish history and everything. I think it's just simply Jesus is not going to, in any way, help this particular marriage get worse. Okay? It's not in him. He's God the Son. He has creative power. He can make the change. His changes, his interventions are always better. But the servants could have said, okay, we're out of the hard place now. Thank you, Jesus. At least you told us what to do. We've got plenty of water. We can go to the maitre d' and tell them we don't have wine, but we have lots of water that we can share with everybody, and they'll just put up with it. No, that's not the agreement. And when I was thinking about this, I thought, in some ways, isn't this the way we do it in religious life in some ways? This particular circumstance, you got people who are there. They could thrive on water and probably enjoy water in some setting. The setting was wine is what makes this party happen. This marriage is honored and celebrated by this exuberance of wine. Water is not wine. Sometimes I think we settle for our Christian experience with Jesus. When he wants to do more in our lives, we actually are like, well, thank you for the water, so to speak. And Jesus is like, I really want to give you wine. I really want to move further in your life. I want you to experience more of me. I want you to experience more of what God the Father has for you, but you're going to have to do what I say. And that's really what Jesus' mother said to the servants. Whatever he says to you, do it. Well, they did it. But he wasn't done. Now he says, dip into the water here, okay? Verse 8. Now draw some out and take it to the chief servant. You want to be that person who dips into 30 gallons of water and take it to the maitre d'? and say, here's what we've got to serve for the rest of the celebration. Somewhere between the water urn and the maitre d', it changed into wine. Now, I think the sequence is clear. Do what he says. But there's water in there. No, do what he says. He says, dip in and take it to the head of ceremonies. Yeah, but this is my last time. This is the last time I'm going to work. I'll be fired on the spot. No, you do what he says. See, here's where I am, and maybe you are too. I believe in miracles. I believe in the God of miracles. But when I get on the edge of seeing actually the difference between where I am and where I think he wants me to go or what he wants me to do, that's the big step. That's the crisis of faith right there. And I could see the guy say, I'm looking at this jar, and no. That is clear. That is kind of whitish, kind of watery. No. How are you going to do this, Jesus? What's going to happen here? I'm going to walk from here to there. It could cost me to do what you just told me to do. Now, that's where miracles kind of get not so fun, right? Because a miracle, it's fun to see a miracle happen, but it's very, very hard to be trusted with one and actually go through the process of actually what faith and trust looks and feels like. Because these servants, they're going to be on the front row of the miracle. They get to see this really private display of power, and the disciples, nobody else is going to know this. They're the ones who are just doing what Jesus said to do. Serving water is not wine. I say this in my mind. I feel like sometimes we do ministry, we do things that we actually know and we're familiar with, and actually we're quite competent to provide. We work hard, we give hard, we share hard, we budget hard, we try to help out. But there's another whole realm of interaction that would require us to say, we really don't have what we need personally of ourselves to address the need that God is moving us toward. We do not have it. To get past that discussion requires faith. Because then we all become bean counters. And we all look at each other's beans, and we all compare beans, and we all put our beans together, and we say, how many beans do we have? Do we have what we need to really address this? No, we don't. The very next thing we do displays whether or not we actually believe in a God of miracles, or we start serving water instead of wine. Because where did the water come from? They did that. Jesus didn't water showed up in the jars. They went to the water. No, the miracle happened between the water jugs and the maitre d'. That's something only Jesus could do. Now, Scripture says, and they did. They did what he told them to do. When the chief servant tasted the water after it had become wine, he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He called the groom and told him, everyone sets out the first wine first, and then after people have gotten drunk or drunk freely, the inferior. He's saying the normal human way of doing this particular event is you put the good wine out there when everybody's drunk it enough and basically had enough to drink. Then you bring on the cheap stuff. And they've drunk so much they can't tell the difference or don't mind the difference, whatever the case. He said that's the human way of doing things. You, on the other hand, have kept the fine wine until now. The human way is to go from the best to the worst. Jesus' way is to go from the good to the best. Do you see this? The wine ultimately has been drunk. It's out. They have no hope. They've run out. The party's over. This particular setting, Jesus is going to take them from what they've had to something better. And Jesus uses this illustration in a variety of ways in the Scripture where he discusses the whole idea of old wine and new wine. He talks about old wineskins and new wineskins. He talks about the idea of this is what you're familiar with, maybe even what you've been familiar with, may even be the idea of the old covenant versus new covenant. Jesus comes in and says, I'm going to do something brand new that you haven't had, that you haven't experienced. Okay? Now, some of you are wondering whether this is alcoholic or not. It probably is, so I'll just rest your mind on that. It's wine. It's the word for wine. It's the word for wine. Okay? It's the word where Paul says, do not be drunk with wine in Ephesians, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. He wouldn't be saying don't get drunk with wine if you can't get drunk with wine. I'm not saying he's encouraging drunkenness in any way. He's saying the culture, whether it's one wine to 3 waters, whatever the case, this maitre d' said what Jesus doesn't know where it came from, but the servants knew. And now the servants are golden. Oh, by the way, the bridegroom's golden. The bridegroom was a loser. He was facing jail time. Okay, he was facing disgrace. He was facing ultimately the loss of favor and honor, which is huge in this culture. He's facing the loss of his status. All kinds of losses associated with this, and now he is the man. Well, he's only the man because Jesus is the man, the Son of God. Took that hopeless, dire situation, spoke into it, and changed the water, essentially the purification jars. If you look at the purification jars as the Old Testament ways, the Old Testament interaction, perhaps Jesus went to these bathtubs, so to speak, and he took the water out of these 20, 30-gallon jugs, and he transformed them into wine. You put them into like cups for serving, 30 gallons, 180 gallons per 8-ounce cups. That's a lot of servings. That's a lot of partying. The idea here, if you don't miss it, in Jesus Christ, he is glorified. He glorifies the Father when he steps into a circumstance that is humanly hopeless, and he remedies it, transforms it to actually speak of what God actually looks about in the future as a huge moment of exuberance with his people. One of the ways that Jesus describes us being together with his people, worshiping him together, is in the marriage supper of the Lamb, the image of a wedding in the future that is going to be attended by his people. Exaggerated beauty and joy and celebration. The glory of the bridegroom is going to completely fill the illustration, the opportunity for us to be there as his people one day in what he's going to call the marriage supper of the Lamb, heaven, glory. Jesus is magnifying weddings itself, perhaps, just by being there, but ultimately, he's looking at this hopeless scenario, this image of wedding that was meant to be an exaggerating, bountiful, God-ordained, God-blessed institution, God-blessed moment for a man and a woman to celebrate their love together, and they messed it up. The groom did. And Jesus comes in as the bridegroom, and he rescues this moment. Now, how do we apply this? Well, we're going to walk through these miracles, and they're not all going to speak to you the same way, but this particular experience it has to do with incompetence. It has to do with human limitations. It has to do with mistakes. It has to just with us being us. It has to do with a particularly meaningful moment that gets marred by humanity. Your humanity or someone else's. It has to do with dashed hopes. It has to do with broken dreams. It has to do with shame. It has to do with a variety of experiences that ultimately you may still be living with. You had dreams, you had visions, you had plans. And humanly speaking, someone stepped in the way and ruined those. Or maybe even you stepped in the way and ruined them for yourself. That's what's going on here. There's nobody like with a crippled leg and an eye that can't see. No, we're not even dealing with that here. We're dealing with water and wine. We're dealing with a circumstance that continues to permeate, could permeate this life, could actually ruin this marriage ceremony and the future. So the miracle, what's the miracle here? The miracle is, first of all, the need for God the Father to see you and me in our moment of failure, see you in our moment of need, realizing we cannot fix this, we cannot remedy this. The circumstances are what they are. We've done all that we can do. We have run out of human energy and life and strength and money and finances and skill and personality and wit. We cannot fix this. And it's the cry, it's the prayer, Father God, you see me. You see us. You see where we are. You see that this moment of joy is about to become a moment of profound shame and sadness. And Jesus walks into that setting, and he looks around and looks at the ordinary things that are there, and looks at the things that ultimately are not solutions. There are no solutions in the room until he gets there. And he can take that particular setting and bring about a transformation, bring about a change that glorifies God the Father through his ability to change what you may see as something as normal, natural, not a solution, but he can bring about a change in such a way that that joy, that pain and that shame and that failure can be remedied by his presence, by his joy. And it's not just for you to experience, but others experience it too. The bridegroom got to experience it, but everybody in that party, that wedding meal, got to experience it too. The best wine started making its way around. Everybody was like, no, this is what we're talking about. Some of our spiritual lives, the wine has run out. Your joy has gone. All right. Maybe it was the original, the joy, the recognition of who Jesus is. Maybe it was a revival that's lasted for the last, 12 years that you were a part of. Maybe it was Christian experience. Maybe it was tied with a mom or dad who is now in heaven and you're operating without them. Whatever the case, your wine, what actually was creating the joy and the celebration in your life, it's not there any longer. You need a miracle. You need a miracle. You need Jesus to see where you are and what you cannot produce any longer and what you have no strength to produce, and say, Jesus, I need you. I need you. I need your joy. I need your power. I need your presence. I need your perspective. I need to know that you are Lord over these circumstances of just innate weakness. I need to know that you're my strength, you're my power, you're my hope, you're my Savior, you're my Lord. I need to know that. And would you do that? And in that knowledge, would you carry out your will in my life? And Jesus will come into your life in that setting, and he will do a work, and he will do a miracle. He will bring about a joy, and you begin to feel it start to bubble within you, and you realize there's something new that is actually better than anything that I ever had before. At first, you'll feel guilty about that. You shouldn't. Some of us love our misery. It gives us identity. Jesus is prepared to move that away. He's prepared to give you something totally new and something fresh, something that will actually restore your soul and give you cause to bring him glory and bring him praise. So we've got 38 weeks of this. Today, maybe you got plenty of wine going on. Some of you, not so much.